Welcome back to the Unassuming Life podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, this podcast is for educational/entertainment purposes only. This is not for financial advice. Now let's get right into it. I am your host, the anonymous voice and human behind the computer screen and in front of the mic that wants to genuinely see you win with money. And today's episode is an important one because we're talking about something almost everyone says they want to do, but very few people actually do well, and that's saving money. So, before we even start off, let me start with a simple question I want to ask you. If your income stayed exactly the same in 2026, meaning no raise, no new job, no side hustles, nothing like that, do you think you could save more money than you did last year? Just sit with that for a second. If your answer was yes, then good. Obviously, you are already thinking probably differently than most of your peers, and you're probably well on your way to financial freedom. Now, if your answer was no, that's okay. You're not lazy, and you're not bad with money or anything like that. You're living in a world that makes saving feel almost impossible. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today in this episode. During this episode, I'm going to walk through why saving feels harder going into 2026, the traditional saving strategies that still matter today, and the non-traditional ways to increase savings that most people avoid or don't talk about enough. This episode is not about extreme frugality. This is not about never enjoying your life. And this is definitely not about stopping buying or purchasing your $10 coffees or your $5 meal deal at McDonald's. This is about intentional saving in a modern world. So let's address the elephant in the room first before we even go further. Why does saving money feel so hard right now? First, because it feels like you have to pay just to even exist and breathe in today's world. You open Instagram, ads. TikTok, ads. Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, ads. YouTube, definitely ads. You walk outside, billboards, stores, subscriptions, notifications, you're blowing up. You are being marketed to constantly. Consumption is everywhere and it's louder than ever before. Second, spending has become so easy, frictionless even. Your debit card is saved, your credit card is linked, you got one-click checkout, you have buy now, pay later like Klarna. There's almost no pause or second between wanting something and buying it. And lastly, things are just honestly just expensive, quite frankly. Housing costs more, food costs more, insurance costs more, everything costs more, and to make matters even worse, wages haven't kept up in the same way. So if saving does feel hard to you, it's not all in your head. It's really happening. But there's a really important part to this whole issue that a lot of people are missing and that I don't want you to miss. And that the solution is not just trying harder or just make more money just out of thin air. It's not brute forcing discipline in your life. It's not cutting out things like your $10 coffees or your small Thursday sushi outings. The solution is building a personal financial environment where saving happens almost automatically. And in 2026, saving isn't going to be just about discipline, it's going to be about the systems that you have in place. And so, this episode, we're going to be talking about how to build those systems so that you can have the best 2026, financially speaking, possible. Now, before we talk about saving, we need to talk about something that is extremely basic, but is critical to understand. And that's that you cannot save money without any cash flow. Pretty obvious, right? Cash flow, at least for we'll say in this episode and for this definition, it just means money that you can reasonably count on coming in. Now, some examples of that would be like a job, a business, or some type of maybe like consistent like side gig work, especially if you're early on, like if you're in college or something like that. Establishing one steady, reliable income source will serve you way better than trying to juggle so many different things when it comes to income sources wise. I'm not saying don't try multiple different things early on. You should. All that I'm saying is that make sure that you at least have one solid, reliable, established income source coming in. Because again, this episode is all about saving, how to maximize saving. Now, quick note, we're not going deep into how to increase your income in this episode, but understand this though, the bigger and more reliable your cash flow, the easier saving becomes. Saving is not a just can just happen out of thin air type of deal. It's math plus behavior, okay? So the bigger your cash flow, the better off you are with saving. Now, once you have your cash flow, the next step is going to be direction. And yes, you probably already know what I'm about to say. We're going to talk about budgeting, but not in a way that makes you want to just turn off this podcast. We're going to just talk about some general strategies of budgeting that you can use. And there's a whole plethora out there, but we're only going to touch on three during this short segment of this episode. The first one being zero based budgeting. Now, zero based budgeting is my personal favorite. I'll talk about that a little bit later on and why that's important. But for right now, just know zero based budgeting is one option that you have. Another option that you have is 50, 30, 20. This is a tried and true, been around for such a long time method of saving where 50% of your income goes towards your needs, 30% of your income goes towards your wants, and then 20% of your income goes towards saving. And the last one that I'm going to touch on is the rule of thirds. And that's also derived from the 50, 30, 20 rule. The only difference is that it's chopped up into thirds. So 33% of your income is going to go to your needs. Then the next 33% is going to go towards your wants. And then the last 33% is going to go into your savings. So as stated earlier, my personal favorite is $0 based budgeting just because of the fact that I am in love with processes. I really enjoy following things step by step. And so zero based budgeting or $0 based budgeting rather, it really helps me to scratch that itch of following a process. And so $0 based budgeting is essentially where every dollar that comes in from my paycheck and when it hits my bank account, it has a job to do. It's going towards something, whether it's saving for a house, whether it's saving for retirement, whether it's for nights out with friends, whether it's for clothes or for food. Every single dollar has a job and it's going to be doing something. So whenever I look at my budget, there is no just leftover, if you will, or not necessarily leftover because I am saving. But what I mean by leftover is that there is no money that's not accounted for, that's just sitting there without a job to do or a category to go under or a category to fund, if you will. So, and that for me, like I said, it does wonders for me and my mental. And you don't have to, like I said, to use $0 based budgeting. That's just what works for me. Different strokes for different folks. However, there's so many other methodologies out there besides $0 based budgeting, the 50, 30, 20 rule, and the rule of thirds that just a simple Google search, and I'm pretty sure you can find you something that fits your style. Once you find something that fits your style, just use it. Stick with that. Don't allow people to convince you which way is better and all that stuff or whatever. Finance is definitely a personalized type of situation or circumstance, rather. It's not all one size fit all. So in the future, what I'll likely do is I'll have an episode where I break down all of the different mainstream methodologies of saving. So don't allow somebody to tell you that your way of budgeting is just absolutely terrible. Do what works best for you. Now, budgeting is important, not because you want to be super asinine and just nitpicky over what you're doing, but it gives you clarity essentially and control over the fund that you want to have. A budget necessarily isn't a restriction. A budget, in my personal opinion, reflects your priorities and what you care about. And here's honestly the shift that a lot of people miss, and that's that you don't want to ask how much can I spend? but you want to ask, how much do I want to save first? And that one question can literally change not only how your 2026 goes, but also how the rest of your financial future goes. Is that when you start to prioritize, or at least have a good idea of what your priorities are by budgeting, the questions that you ask yourself start to change and flip more into empowerment rather than becoming more of a like nuisance. Now, once you're budgeting, something very interesting actually happens. You start to notice things that you actually want to change. So for example, maybe money is leaving without you really like remembering where it went, or maybe you notice you spent a little bit too much on subscriptions, or maybe you spent a little bit too much on impulse nights out with friends. It's very easy, especially in today's world, to spend $100 without even realizing it. For example, spending $100 is as easy as one entree, a couple of drinks with some friends, an activity, and then parking slash if you got an Uber somewhere, taking an Uber. Especially if you live near a major or big city. Now, I'm not saying don't enjoy your life or anything. I'm just saying to be aware, because that was something that definitely shocked me once I actually started budgeting. Awareness always comes before improvement. You can't improve something that you don't track. I forgot where I heard that from, but you cannot make any improvements on anything that you don't track, nor can you know where you came from if you don't track something. When you spend intentionally, you save intentionally. Sometimes you might find yourself spending more on things that you really don't care about, or things that you really don't even need, and which then takes away from the things that you actually do care about, or the things that you actually do want to invest in or actually spend money towards. So again, when you spend intentionally by budgeting, you can then save intentionally. Those are pretty much all of the traditional ways that I'm going to touch on, at least in this episode. Now we're going to actually move on before going into the non-traditional ways of increasing savings. We're going to talk about debt, and more specifically, high interest debt. Now, depending on your school of thought or where you go to research, high interest debt is defined by many different metrics. For this episode, I'm just going to say it's any debt above roughly 7-ish% interest. Anything that's above 7% interest deserves your immediate attention. You might be saying, well, what are some things that can get that high when it comes to interest? For starters, credit card balances. If you have ever fell behind on a credit card before, or if you've had some type of balance that carried over, you will immediately find out just how high of an interest rate your credit card has. So, number one, for starters, is paying off any type of credit card balances that you might have going on in your life. That will immediately free up some money for you to then potentially use towards savings or just other areas of your life. The next thing is payday loans. Now, for those that are maybe looking for some type of like quick money because they're in a really bad situation, sometimes you might have to go get a payday loan. I do not recommend payday loans, but if you do have them, you can read through the contract and see for yourself. Payday loans oftentimes have absolutely terribly rather high interest rates. So getting those paid off and done with would immensely free up some capital. And last but certainly not least, and I know we've all, or at least a good majority of us, have dealt with it, maybe still are dealing with it. And I can make a whole episode about it. And that's student loans, but more specifically, your private student loans. I can't even begin to go into how high of an interest rate that I've either seen or heard of people talking about that come with private student loans. I'll make an episode in the future talking about my college experience and some things that I learned and took away from, and kind of how I was able to get through college. I'm actually going to mention something later on in this episode about my college experience that I'll end up making a video on probably down the line. Don't know necessarily when just now, but definitely down the line, because I definitely want to give you the game on how I was able to maneuver through college with very minimal basically cost slash debt. So here's after saying all that, here's just the truth about high interest debt. Paying off high interest debt is the same thing as earning a guaranteed return. If you are familiar with the finance space and probably have been around finance YouTube for a while, if you will, you probably have heard that saying before. If you are new here, or at least new to the finance space of YouTube, or if you will, or you're just now starting off on wanting to improve your financial position, or you're just curious, um, you're going to hear that a lot, and that's that paying off any type of debt, no matter if it's high interest, low interest, doesn't really matter. Paying off any debt is basically you earning a guaranteed return. For example, if you're paying 20% interest on a credit card, you are once that's done and paid off, you then now have money that you would not have had before, which is aka a guaranteed return. So paying off high interest debt, it immediately, like I said before, frees you up with capital that you can use towards other things. And if you're paying off a high interest form of debt, you're not bad with money. We've all at some point in time, or at least a lot of us have. I know I have for sure. Have gotten ourselves in some sticky financial situations, or at least positions, if you will. It's not about necessarily where you're at. It's more about where you want to go, and you learning from where you are currently at, or from your past mistakes and that kind of thing. So no room for judgment here. We've all kind of been there before. You're not bad with money. It's all about learning. Now, going back to the importance of paying off high interest debt, when you actually don't pay off that debt, you have to know that that debt is working against you and your saving potential every single month. And that's why it's so important for you to actually go ahead and try your best to get it paid off. Now, I understand that becoming debt free is not a quick process. It's not going to happen overnight. That's going to definitely take some time. All you need to do is to establish a plan. Establish a plan on how you're going to get the debt paid off, whether it's high interest, low interest, doesn't really matter. Get the debt paid off, have a plan, and you'll be well on your way of having more income in your pocket to dedicate towards saving. Now, we're going to talk about some of the stuff that people don't like to admit, or at least talk about. And these are some of the non traditional ways of how to increase your saving, especially going into 2026. Now, me personally, I think a lot of people don't tend to talk about these ways because they're not necessarily finance strategies. They're more mindset strategies that then impact your social, emotional, and maybe even your ego a little bit. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a little bit. For starters, all of these strategies are going to focus on lowering your biggest expenses like housing, transportation, and education. Let's start with housing first. One thing that I think would immensely help you going forward in 2026 is living with your parents. Yes, I said it. Stay your butt at home. Now, I know that might go against what a lot of social media, or at least just what you're seeing uh, across the internet sphere, if you will, but staying home, especially if you have the privilege and your parents will allow you to, and in some cases they won't charge you rent, take full advantage of that. I'm going to be honest, the same way that Nepo babies have the privilege of being able to use whatever platform or use whatever success that their parents or their loved ones built, and then they can use it for their gain. You're just doing the same thing, just in a more modest sense, in my honest opinion. So do it, take advantage of it. If you are able to stay home with your parents, you're going to be able to save so much money. And let's just say that, like, your parents don't necessarily allow you to stay there just scot free. I promise you, contributing to a bill or two, helping out with groceries around the house is going to be dramatically cheaper than going out in this world on your own, especially if your income is not where you want it to be at. Going out on this world on your own and struggling to make ends meet. I really feel like the more that this new age of, I guess if you want to say, finance or just the economy in general starts to like come about, it's not as friendly, if you will, in my personal opinion, towards mistakes, or it doesn't have as much forgiveness when it comes to being young or inexperienced, or it's becoming very harsh in my personal opinion. So if you have the ability to and the privilege of staying home, even if it's not for scot free, I promise you, you're going to save so much money. I'm even considering right now, personally, moving back home. I right now currently don't stay with my parents, but I am heavily considering it just because of the fact that you are going to save so much money. Now, I do understand that not everybody has the privilege of staying with their family. Even if they could, they can't. Even if they wanted to contribute, for whatever reason you're unable to stay back home with your parents, that's okay. What I'm going to tell you is to prioritize having a roommate. Now, I know you might not want to hear that because you want some type of privacy. You can still have some privacy, depending on the apartment setup, or if you want to rent a house, whatever the case may be. Before I go further, I am not talking about house hacking. That's not what I'm talking about here. House hacking comes with its own risk, and in my personal opinion, it comes with a little bit, not even a little bit, it comes with dramatically higher risk than just having a roommate. Consider getting a roommate. That's just, I you're going to save so much money rather than living by yourself. I currently live by myself, and so I oftentimes, whenever I pay rent, and granted, I am a little bit more attentive now to my finances. So my rent isn't egregious, but I still look at it every month and I'm like, man, I could save a little bit more if I went ahead and got a roommate. But it is what it is. You live and you learn. But if you are going to go with a roommate, do not go out and get an apartment that you cannot afford if you did not have the roommate. Now, yes, that might result in a smaller apartment. Yes, that might result potentially in maybe not as nice of an apartment, but I'm telling you, the peace of mind that you're going to have about not only one, saving money, but then two, of knowing that if your roommate for whatever reason bailed on you, or they lost their job, or whatever the case may be, or they just don't want to live with you anymore, you can still upkeep the apartment, and then also two, you can find or have time to find another roommate. Just something to consider seriously. So those are the two things that would heavily impact housing. If you can dramatically save on your housing costs, because as you've probably have seen all over the news and everything, housing is so expensive right now across America. It is ridiculous. If you can save on that, just on that one aspect of your expenses, you're going to come out so far ahead. And especially if you're young, if you have friends that are all on the same page mentally and they want to better their lives, and they have a steady stream of income, and y'all all are about, improvement and, trying to make a way in this interesting economy, that might be a group of friends that you might want to consider living with. I'm serious. Just consider it. Like I said, this is just food for thought. Consider it. The next thing is sharing expenses. I honestly, I don't even think I have to say anymore. I don't think in 2026, unless you're just balling like that, we're splitting the bill. Now, if you're taking somebody on a date, it might be a different story. But if this is like a casual thing, we're splitting the bill in 2026, all 2026. We are lifestyle maxing in 2026. Okay. So please, if you're going out, or if you're going to be hanging out with friends, discuss those type of things before y'all go out. Discuss what the bill situation is going to be like. Discuss a budget, quite frankly, too, so that y'all can, so that everybody can just maximize what's best for them and their financial situation. The next thing, and the last thing that I wanted to touch on that people don't really seem to talk a lot about, especially in today's world, is taking a lighter course load and paying cash for school. This is something that I have a lot of experience with. In the future, I'll make an episode about how I was able to get through school. Long story short, I am very fortunate and I am very proud to say that I graduated with zero debt. However, I had to essentially work to pay for some of my classes. And I'm not talking about work study. I actually did do work study, but I also got a part time job while I also did work study to be able to afford to go to school. And my school choice impacted the amount that I had to pay. I'll make like a whole video about what my strategy was whenever I decided to like go to school. But with that being said, really consider either taking a lighter course load, meaning that you might not be able to be full time, and that's okay, and or paying cash for school because the debt is just not worth it. It's not, especially in today's society when you have AI, when you're trying to figure out where you fit in all this, the debt is not worth it. And as I stated earlier, the world to me, especially over here in the US, is becoming a lot more harsh and it's not as giving and as willing when it comes to making mistakes. That's just my personal perspective of things. I want to see you win. So if you can do anything to limit the potential amount of hardship that might come your way due to factors that you don't even have control over, do it. Take advantage of it. Even if that may mean you might have to stay in school, or it might take you, instead of 4 years being 4 and done or less, it might take you 5 or it might take you 6. The peace of mind that's going to come with not having any debt from or very little debt from going to school is you're going to be miles ahead of your peers. Some other quick little extra tips for my college individuals: really consider community college or staying in state for school. I'll make a whole another video about how I was able to go to school and graduate debt free. I'll give all that information in a future episode, but just something for my college folks or for people that are seeking higher education. And again, all of these strategies work because they reduce your biggest expenses, especially if you're young, when it comes to housing, transportation, and education. Oh, before I forget, I did not touch on transportation. Public transportation is a hack. I know you might not like the idea of taking public transit, but if you live near a big city or in a town that has some really good just infrastructure, please, please, please just consider it. Just consider it. And if you don't want to do that, then carpooling is also another option. Carpooling, public transportation, look into it. I think those two are pretty simple. I don't have to go super in depth on how that impacts you financially speaking wise, or how that can impact you for the better. Consider it seriously. Like I said, these work because these are basically your biggest expenses essentially. Um, and so again, I understand that it might slow down some people's timelines or ideas of when they wanted to like achieve their goals. It may even make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, like especially if you decide like to stay with your parents and go back home. That might make you feel uncomfortable a little bit. But remember that discomfort is often the price for acceleration later. Again, I'm not asking you to stay in isolation and never hang out with friends. I'm just suggesting a few mindful changes that could essentially just impact your savings, and just your overall financial health, essentially. Something that I am going to talk more about. I haven't started doing it yet just because 2026 just started, but I'm looking forward into cooking more at home and having more friends over my apartment and doing things like having games and drinks at my own place rather than going out somewhere, and those type of things. Now, this is basically the end of the episode, but before we end it, I do want to leave you with something, and that's that saving is not about deprivation, it's all about giving you options. For example, an option to maybe leave a job that you don't like, an option of handling emergencies and not stressing out over them, an option of investing in your future self. Your plan also does not need to be perfect. Progress beats perfection every single time. And most times, waiting for the perfect moment often leads to never starting at all. So I'm gonna leave you with that. Hopefully, something in today's episode gave you a new perspective. And as always, thanks for listening. See you next time.